Hello, my name is Kirioth, and recently there's been quite a lot of Warhammer 40k content on this channel, and that's because I really enjoy it, and I've really got back into it with the sort of appearance of 8th edition, which is the newest tabletop version of the game. But Warhammer 40,000 isn't necessarily tabletop, it isn't necessarily plastic models or resin models or painting or wargaming. There is actually a huge amount of lore and a huge amount of backstory to the tabletop, effectively. And I kind of realised the other day that whilst I really enjoy making videos about it, you kind of need like a basic knowledge of the universe for any of the stuff like Space Marines and Primaris Space Marines and all of this stuff to really mean anything, for it to make any real sense. So I thought what we'd do is we would do a series of videos that is very beginner friendly. So it's kind of laying down the foundations of what is going on in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. You know, what races there are, what these races do, how they interact with each other, how the universe came to be in that state, or at least the galaxy, and we'd kind of start from the beginning and work our way up. And what we'll do is we'll focus on a different faction each time. So to start with, it will be like the history of the Imperium, the history of the Eldar, which are one of the alien races, the history of the Necrons, which is another alien race, the history of Chaos, which is, well, not another race specifically, well, sort of, there's demons and shit, but when we get to that point, you'll know what that is, because we'll explain it. And that way, hopefully, you'll be able to build up just a nice baseline of knowledge about Warhammer 40,000 and the lore that's behind it, so that then when you hear about other stuff that's going on, you have that reference point, that point where you can compare what's happening now to what you already know. And you never know, it might get you into the lore and you might start reading the books and stuff, because as I say, there's a huge amount of backstory, a huge amount of lore, loads of books, loads of things to look into. And I think what we'll do, based on the fact that most of the news we've been receiving recently in terms of new developments have been centered around the Imperium, which is basically humanity's empire in the stars, we'll start with humanity, and we'll do like a nice, rough, simple, easy to follow timeline of where humanity came from, where they are now, and kind of what got them to that stage. And we won't make it really long with loads of detail, we'll just keep it nice and short. I'm aiming for these to be about 10 minutes, maybe a little bit over. Nice, easily digestible chunks, and you know, we can always go into more detail in future videos, but for now, let's just get the baseline there. Let's get that nice foundation of knowledge of 40k lore. So, humans in Warhammer 40,000. Well, they are essentially the humans that you know of today, with a few variations, which we will get to. So, it's kind of, the story of humanity starts out fairly normally. You've got Earth, you've got humans, and eventually they reach out into the stars. They decide to colonize other planets. Technology is improving, and there's this way to travel really vast distances by dipping into something called the warp. Now, the warp is like an ethereal realm. It's like another dimension where all of the emotions that humanity and other races as well feel are reflected, and it's not great because it's infested with demons and spirits and God knows what else, to put it simply. And humanity learned that they are able to dip into the warp and they're able to use it to travel further. So humanity goes from colonising a few planets to realising they can go further and colonise even more. Then we start to get the appearance of psykers. Now, psykers are basically psychics, sort of. They're able to use power from the warp, and they're able to use it to see certain things or perform certain abilities like fire lightning out your hands, all kinds of cool stuff like that. So we start to develop psykers. It's kind of found out that some psykers are able to navigate the warp better, so they can go even further, they can travel even greater distances, and they're able to allow humanity to spread even further and even faster than before. So at this point, humanity is a proper space-faring empire. We've got planets that have been colonised left, right and centre. There's also the advent of kind of shareable technology. Everything is based on a certain template, and there are these, I guess, factories, if you want to call them that, where they can just produce constant resources based on these templates. So for every world you go to, there will be the same type of tank, or there'll be the same kind of bunker, or the same type of home, or there'll be the same type of building, stuff like that. It's a way for humanity to basically land on a world, and immediately they're able to start fabricating somewhere to live, areas where they can build up defences, areas where they can farm, stuff like that. Now, that is a huge deal, because it means that humanity is just able to make it go even quicker. They can expand even faster, and they are at a point now where they have a pretty damn big kind of collection of planets among the stars. It's not 100% uniform. There's a lot of variation between humans as time goes on. Different planets will find that humans have got slight variations to them, so you'll end with some who is shorter. You'll get humans that go a bit sort of bestial. You'll get humans that are kind of developed evolutionary traits to deal with, say, a lot of moisture, for instance, like a lot of ocean or water. So you have these kind of different strains of human appearing. Then there's a massive catastrophe. Everything goes wrong. There's a colossal warp storm that just rips into real space and isolates all these different planets away from each other. So where once humanity was able to contact each other, they were able to just spread out amongst the stars as they pleased, now they are isolated and they are alone. The technology that they relied on, the technology that kept them going, essentially starts to vanish. A lot of it is damaged, a lot of it is broken, some of it is treated with outright suspicion, and there are hints here and there about a kind of rebellion from robotic helpers that humanity has developed, an actual war between man and machine. That is that is bad. Humanity is on the brink of destruction, essentially. They are isolated from one another. They cease to exist as a coherent whole, and instead you've essentially just got isolated planets that happen to have people on them spread throughout the galaxy. No way of communicating, no way of keeping up with each other, no way of sharing information or technology. The human race starts to stagnate, and eventually they start to die out, and that's really, really bad. During this time, Earth is essentially a horrendous wasteland that's just ruled over by barbarians. The technology that they used to have has been turned to creating vast cloned armies, and everything sort of regresses to almost like a medieval state, almost like a Stone Age state, except they do have technology. It's just a lot of them don't really know what the hell to do with it apart from make weapons of mass destruction and blow the shit out of each other. During this horrendous time, there comes a man, simply called the Emperor, and there's various ideas as to where he came from, and to be honest, at this point, I'm going to be totally blunt, I don't want to say what his origins are, because I don't know what the current thing is. At one point it was suggested that he was the reincarnated form of like 1,000 or 10,000 shamans or something ridiculous, or 100 psychic shamans. There's all kinds of little things that have been touched upon in various books and various theories, but we'll say simply that a man appeared, called the Emperor, and he had vast psychic abilities. He was insanely strong, incredibly strong, possibly the strongest human that has ever lived or will live. And he has got a grand vision for humanity. He sets about conquering Earth, which he achieves. He unites all of Earth under his rule. He then sets out to retake Mars, and Mars is where all of the technology happens. It is where humanity kind of set itself in terms of where stuff is made and where innovation happens. That happened at Mars. Not anymore, because the horrendous storms that isolated all the planets essentially caused Mars to just regress in on itself, where technology becomes sacred and they don't want to innovate anything, because no, this is how this works, this is how it has always worked, and you will respect that or you can piss off, is essentially how tech priests now work, and how they've worked for quite some time. There were radicals that decided that they were going to actually innovate stuff, and you can see that in reflections of recent law with certain individuals who we'll touch on in another episode. But at this point, the golden age of technology, as it kind of was, or it should have been, is past. Technology has regressed slightly, but with a new driving force in the form of the Emperor, humanity is back on the rise. The Emperor decides that he is going to conquer the galaxy. He is going to go out to all of the former worlds that were united under humanity. He's going to bring them back into the fold, into his Imperium, and to help him with this, he crafts 20 like gene-crafted demigods. He creates almost abhuman guys to help him. They are his sons, they are the Primarchs, and each one of them will lead a vast legion of superhuman soldiers. Like engineered dudes who are 7 to God knows how many feet tall, wearing massive power armour and holding essentially just handheld rocket launchers. They are technically guns, but they fire what are basically rockets. And he creates these. He creates his legions, he creates the Primarchs. The Primarchs get scattered across the galaxy. He goes around the galaxy, essentially uniting every forgotten human world under the banner of the Imperium, finding the Primarchs, reuniting them with the legions, which were constructed with technology that he used for the Primarchs. He used parts of the Primarchs to make them. So, for instance, as an example, one of the Primarchs is Magnus of the Thousand Suns, and the Thousand Suns Legion very much take after him. He has vast psychic potential, and the Thousand Suns have incredible psychic potential. Another one is Leman Russ. He was essentially like a Viking barbarian king, and he was feral, and he was violent, and he was the executioner. His sons took after him, so they were barbarian-esque, they were Viking, they were feral. You get the idea. Each legion took after the Primarch that they were made from. Eventually, though, having united all of his sons, the Great Crusaders, it was called, was bringing the Imperium back together. It was building the Imperium up. Fully half of his sons, half of the Primarchs, turned traitor, set course back for Earth, or Terra as it's actually known, in Warhammer 40,000, and there his favoured son Horus, with the help of the Warp, which we'll get to in a different video, almost killed the Emperor. Nearly. Very nearly killed the Emperor. A considerable number of loyal Primarchs were killed in the fighting, many were missing, after the Great Horus Heresy, it was called, after the Great War that pitted humanity against itself, and the Chaos Primarchs didn't fare too well either in some cases. But after all of that Great Rebellion was done and finished with, the Emperor became just a husk of a human being strapped into the Golden Throne, which is basically a mechanism to power a navigating beacon that all ships use to travel through the warp. Without this beacon, warp travel is basically impossible, and the Emperor was the one who was keeping it going. Now, all that's really left of him is his psychic might, and that is just being poured into the Golden Throne, which allows humanity to navigate the great warp channels they use to get from place to place. Horus is dead. The Emperor murdered him outright, essentially obliterating his entire presence from the galaxy because the Emperor is hardcore, and that leads to where we are today. The Imperium from that point has not really changed, it's just grown. The Emperor has become regarded as a god, which he is absolutely against. He did not want to be a god, he wanted to save humanity from gods, from religion, and from the corruption that the warp brings, and that's not worked. The Imperium is this giant, ever-expanding, ever-collapsing kind of paradox where it's too big to fall, but at the same time it's always on the verge of collapse. Even as they lose entire systems to alien threat, to warp storms, to treachery or heresy, they are bringing new worlds and new systems into the fold of the Imperium. It's a never-ending cycle. And that's where we are now. That's where everything happens at the moment. Warhammer 40,000 is set around 10,000 years after the Horus Heresy, and the Horus Heresy is what set everything off. The Imperium is just an eternal nightmare grind of war where every citizen is born to die in service to the Emperor, and that's pretty much all they ever get to do. It's really not a nice place to live. I'm not really selling it to you as a nice area to go on holiday, but there you go, that's just how things are now. Humanity started out with great promise, they expanded across the stars, everything went badly wrong, until one man came to fix everything, but then that one man made an error in judgment and ended up being killed by the very beings that he created to assist him in bringing humanity together. Now humanity is essentially trapped in this never-ending nightmare of war, where their massive, stagnant but growing, collapsing, paradoxical empire is just there to be beaten the shit out of by everything else in the galaxy. And that's the Imperium in Warhammer 40,000. It's very brief, I know, it doesn't go into a huge amount of detail, but it gives you a good baseline of knowledge, and we'll go into the specifics of it more in future videos. So we will cover specifically the different ages that I mentioned. They do have names, I haven't mentioned them here, we will cover them later. I'll go into the specific Primarchs, the sons of the Emperor who turned traitor and who stayed loyalist. We'll cover significant events during the Horus Heresy, and we'll cover significant events that have happened in the Imperium since that time. But for now, that is the Imperium, that is the Empire of Man in Warhammer 40,000, and it sounds bloody awful. Thank you very much for watching. There's more videos there, there's like a link to Patreon, there's a subscribe button, all kinds of fancy stuff. If you like the video and all of that, and I will see you for the next one. Toodaloo.